In the heart of a bustling city where history whispers through every cobblestone and palace wall, lies a world of timeless rituals that bridge the past and present. These are not just spectacles for tourists, but living threads of culture that teach us about loyalty, pageantry, and the enduring spirit of a nation. Dive into the true tale of Emily, a young historian from a small American town, whose journey to London unveiled royal traditions that transformed her view of heritage, igniting a passion for preserving stories that unite us all. Emily stepped off the plane at Heathrow Airport, her backpack heavy with guidebooks and a notebook filled with scribbled questions. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain and distant tea shops. She had always been fascinated by history from afar, reading about kings and queens in dusty library books back home. But now, at 28 years old, she was here in London for the first time, drawn by a grant to study British customs. Little did she know that her 2-week trip would immerse her in royal traditions that felt alive, pulsing with the energy of crowds and the weight of centuries. Her first stop was Buckingham Palace, the grand home of the British monarch. As she joined the throng of visitors, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden light on the palace's stone facade. The changing of the guard ceremony was about to begin, a ritual dating back to the 17th century, where soldiers in red tunics and tall bearskin hats marched with precision. Emily watched as the old guard handed over duties to the new one, accompanied by brass bands playing stirring marches. The crowd cheered, and she felt a thrill run through her. It wasn't just a show. It was a symbol of continuity, reminding everyone that some things endure amid change. Wandering further, Emily learned about the palace's balcony appearances, where the royal family waves to the public during major events. She imagined the cheers during jubilees or weddings, like when Prince William and Kate Middleton share their kiss there. But what struck her most was the everyday respect people showed, locals tipping hats or pausing in quiet admiration. It made her think about her own country's traditions like Independence Day parades and how they foster a sense of belonging. As the day wore on, Emily visited Westminster Abbey, another cornerstone of royal life. This ancient church had hosted coronations since 1066, when William the Conqueror was crowned. She walked the aisles, her footsteps echoing on the stone floors where queens like Elizabeth II had been anointed. The abbey's Gothic arches towered above, adorned with memorials to poets and kings. A guide shared stories of the crown jewels' role in these ceremonies, sparkling symbols of power passed down through generations. Emily sat in a pew, sketching the intricate carvings, feeling connected to the past. She met an elderly volunteer named Mr. Hargrove, who had attended the Queen's funeral procession. He described the solemn hush as the coffin passed, draped in the royal standard, with bagpipes wailing. "It's not about the pomp," he said softly. "It's about honoring those who serve." His words stayed with her, sparking a desire to witness more. That evening, over fish and chips in a nearby pub, Emily reflected on the day's sights. The traditions weren't frozen in time. They evolved, including modern touches like eco-friendly uniforms for the guards. She jotted notes about how these rituals drew millions, boosting tourism and pride. But deeper, they taught lessons in discipline and community values she wanted to bring back home. The next morning brought her to Kensington Palace, once home to Princess Diana. Here, the tradition of royal gardens came alive. Emily strolled through the sunken garden, redesigned in Diana's memory, with white flowers symbolizing her grace. It was a quieter tradition, one of personal tribute amid public life. Families picnicked nearby, sharing stories of royal weddings broadcast worldwide, like Harry and Meghan's, which blended old customs with new diversity. Emily paused at the statue of Diana with children, a nod to her humanitarian work. It reminded her that royal traditions aren't just for the elite. They inspire global change. She chatted with a gardener who explained how the palace hosts exhibitions on royal fashion, showcasing outfits from coronations to state banquets. Each piece told a story of craftsmanship and symbolism, like the orb representing Christian sovereignty. As dusk fell, Emily headed to the Tower of London, guardian of the crown jewels. The yeoman warders, or beefeaters, in their Tudor uniforms, led tours recounting bloody histories of executions and imprisonments. But the jewel house gleamed with treasures used in coronations, the scepter, the crown, all under heavy guard. Watching a raven hop across the green, legend says if they leave, the kingdom falls. She marveled at how myths intertwined with reality. That night, in her modest hotel room, Emily dreamed of processions and palaces. These traditions, she realized, were threads weaving London's identity, inviting everyone to witness and learn. Emily's adventure deepened as she ventured to Horse Guard's parade for the daily mounting of the guard. The clatter of hooves on pavement announced the household cavalry, soldiers on black horses with gleaming helmets. This tradition, protecting the monarch since Charles II's time, unfolded with drills and inspections. Emily stood close, feeling the ground vibrate, her heart racing with the rhythm. A young boy next to her gasped in awe, and she smiled, seeing how it sparked wonder in new generations. She learned from a nearby officer about the rigorous training, months of practice for perfect synchronization. It wasn't mere display. It ensured readiness, a blend of ceremony and security. Emily thought of her own life, how routines build strength, and felt inspired to adopt more discipline. Later, she explored St. James's Palace, the senior royal residence. Though not open to the public, its exterior buzzed with history as the site where new monarchs are proclaimed. Emily watched diplomats enter for audiences, a tradition of statecraft. A street performer nearby mimicked royal waves, drawing laughs, showing how traditions adapt to humor and modernity. In the afternoon, Windsor Castle beckoned, the world's oldest inhabited castle. Emily took a train ride, arriving to views of the sprawling grounds. The state apartments, with their opulent rooms, hosted banquets for visiting leaders, a tradition of diplomacy. She admired the Waterloo Chamber, commemorating Napoleon's defeat, with portraits of allies. A highlight was the Order of the Garter ceremony, though not happening that day. Guides described the knights in blue robes processing to St. George's Chapel. Emily visited the chapel, burial place of Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth II, feeling the solemnity. Tombs and banners told tales of chivalry, a code still honored today. Wandering the long walk, a tree-lined avenue, she met locals walking dogs, sharing how the castle's flag signals the monarch's presence. When it's flying, the queen or king is home, a simple yet profound tradition. Emily picnicked there, pondering how these sites foster national unity. As evening came, she attended evensong at the chapel, voices soaring in ancient hymns. It was a peaceful end, reinforcing that royal traditions offer solace amid life's chaos. Energized, Emily headed to the Thames for a boat tour, viewing royal sights from the water. Passing Hampton Court Palace, once Henry VIII playground, she heard of Tudor banquets recreated for visitors, feasts with jesters, and music reviving old customs. Though she didn't enter, the stories painted vivid pictures of lavish life. Next was the Trooping the Color, but since it was off-season, she watched videos at a museum. This annual parade marks the monarch's official birthday, with over 1,400 soldiers marching. Emily imagined the flypast of RAF planes, the royal family on the balcony waving. It celebrated military prowess and family bonds. She visited the Royal Mews, home to state carriages. The gold state coach, used for coronations since 1762, gleamed with intricate carvings. A curator explained its 8-hour journeys through London streets, crowds lining up. Emily touched a replica harness, feeling the weight of history. In a quiet moment, she reflected on royal christenings at places like the Lily Font in Buckingham Palace Chapel. These intimate traditions, blending faith and family, humanized the monarchy. That day ended with a visit to Kew Palace in the Royal Botanic Gardens. Here, George III family lived simply, a contrast to grandeur. Emily walked the gardens, learning about plant collecting traditions that advance science. Back in London, she joined a walking tour of royal haunts, like Clarence House, former home of the Queen Mother. Stories of garden parties flowed. Thousands invited annually for tea with the royals, honoring community service. Emily felt her perspective shifting. These traditions weren't distant. They invited participation, teaching respect and curiosity. As her trip neared its midpoint, Emily delved into lesser-known traditions. At the Royal Hospital Chelsea, home to veteran pensioners in scarlet coats, she witnessed the Founders' Day Parade. These Chelsea pensioners marched proudly, a tradition honoring military service since 1692. Emily talked with one, a World War II veteran named Albert, who shared tales of meeting the Queen. His eyes sparkled, showing how such events preserve dignity and memory. Inspired, she explored the tradition of Maundy Thursday, where the monarch distributes coins to the elderly. Though seasonal, exhibits at the British Museum detailed its roots in humility, the sovereign washing feet like Jesus. Emily saw replicas of the purses, symbolizing charity. Afternoon brought her to the Guildhall for stories of Lord Mayor's shows, a parade since the Middle Ages, with floats and pageantry welcoming new mayors tied to royal charters. Videos showed the monarch attending, blending civic and royal worlds. She then visited the National Portrait Gallery, viewing royal images from Tudors to Windsors. Each portrait captured evolving traditions, like state openings of Parliament, where the king reads the speech from the throne in robes and crown. Emily sketched Queen Victoria's image, pioneer of modern traditions like white wedding dresses. It connected to current royals adapting customs, like including diverse guests at events. Evening found her at a theater showing the Crown props exhibit, linking fiction to fact. She learned about investitures, where honors like knighthoods are bestowed, traditions recognizing everyday heroes. Walking back, street lights illuminated banners for upcoming jubilees, reminding her that these rituals evolve, incorporating technology like live streams to reach global audiences. Emily's notebook overflowed, each entry a testament to how witnessing these traditions fostered personal growth, urging her to cherish her own cultural roots. With days left, Emily focused on interactive experiences. She booked a tour of the Houses of Parliament, site of the state opening. Guides described the black rod summoning MPs, a quirky tradition of doors slammed in his face, symbolizing independence. Inside the Lord's chamber, she sat where the throne stands, imagining the pomp of robes and crowns. She learned about royal ascents, where bills become law with the monarch's nod, a quiet but vital custom. It highlighted the constitutional monarchy's balance. Next, Regent's Park hosted her for stories of royal parks, traditions of public access granted by kings. Joggers and families enjoyed spaces once private, a gift to the people. At the Serpentine, she heard of Christmas swims, but more royally the Diana Memorial Fountain, a modern tradition of remembrance through play and water. Afternoon took her to Greenwich, home of the Royal Observatory. Here, the prime meridian tradition ties to naval history, with the ball drop signaling time, a precursor to New Year's balls worldwide. She stood on the line, 1 foot in each hemisphere, feeling connected globally. The Cutty Sark nearby told of tea clipper races patronized by royals, advancing trade. Evening brought a pub quiz on royal trivia, where locals shared personal stories, like seeing the Queen's barge on the Thames for Jubilees, a floating procession. Emily went around, her knowledge growing. These traditions, she realized, weren't static. They adapted, including eco-initiatives like planting trees for coronations. As night fell, she gazed at the London Eye, lit in royal colors for celebrations, a modern twist on fireworks traditions. Her journey was culminating, each experience building engagement and wonder. In her final days, Emily sought culmination. She revisited Buckingham Palace for a garden tour, learning about investiture gardens where honors are given. Flowers bloomed in patterns from royal crests, a living tradition. She attended a mock changing ceremony at a museum, dressing in uniform replicas, feeling the discipline required. Then, to St. Paul's Cathedral, site of royal weddings like Charles and Diana's. The dome echoed with organ music, and she climbed for views, pondering Thanksgivings held there for victories and births. A guide recounted the Jubilee bells, pealed nationwide, a sonic tradition uniting the realm. Emily visited the Royal Albert Hall for a prom concert, echoing royal patronage of arts. The last night's flag-waving embodied patriotic fervor. Her last stop was Hyde Park, for Speaker's Corner, a free speech tradition tolerated by royals, showing tolerance. As she boarded her flight home, Emily carried not just souvenirs, but a transformed spirit. London's royal traditions had shown her the power of witnessing history in action, encouraging all to engage with their heritage for personal and communal growth. Emily stepped off the plane at Heathrow Airport on a cool morning in early spring. The sky was gray, but the air felt fresh and full of promise. She was 28 years old, a young historian from a small town in America. She had read about London for years in books and watched videos online. Now she was here for real. Her backpack was heavy with notebooks, a camera, and a list of places she wanted to see. She had saved money for 2 weeks in the city to study British royal traditions up close. She wanted to understand why these old customs still mattered in the modern world. She took the train into the center of London. The ride was smooth, and she looked out at the green fields turning into busy streets. When she reached her small hotel near Victoria Station, she dropped her bags and went straight out. She could not wait. Her first goal was Buckingham Palace. Everyone said the changing of the guard was the best way to start. She walked down the wide road called the Mall. Trees lined both sides, and flags flew high. People were already gathering in front of the palace gates. Emily found a spot near the front, close to the black iron railings. The palace looked huge, with its gray stone walls and tall windows. Guards in red tunics and black bearskin hats stood still like statues outside the gates. They did not move or smile. Emily felt excited. This was the start of something special. At around 10:30 in the morning, things began to happen. A band started playing music from somewhere behind the palace. The sound was loud and clear with drums and trumpets. Then, the new guard marched in from the side street. They wore bright red coats, shiny black boots, and those tall furry hats made from bearskin. The hats looked heavy, but the soldiers marched perfectly in step. Their feet hit the ground at the same time, making a sharp sound on the pavement. A crowd cheered as they came closer. The old guard waited in the palace courtyard. They had been on duty since early morning. Now it was time to hand over their responsibility. The two groups met in the middle of the forecourt. Officers on horseback rode between them, giving orders in clear voices. The band played more tunes, some fast and happy, some slow and proud. Emily watched every move. She had seen this on videos, but being here felt different. The ground shook a little when the soldiers marched. She could smell the polish on their boots and hear the horses snort. The ceremony lasted about 45 minutes. The soldiers inspected each other, checked their rifles, and finally, the keys to the palace were handed over in a small box. It was a simple act, but it carried centuries of meaning. This tradition started long ago, back in the time of King Charles II in the 1660s. Soldiers needed to guard the king, and they had to change shifts without leaving the palace empty. Over time, it turned into this big public show. When Queen Victoria made Buckingham Palace her main home in 1837, the ceremony moved here and became famous around the world. Emily stood there until the end. When the new guard marched inside the palace gates and the old guard left, the crowd clapped. She felt a rush of joy. This was not just a parade. It showed discipline, pride, and a promise that some things stay the same even when the world changes fast. People around her were smiling. A family from India took photos, and a group of school children asked questions to their teacher. An old man next to Emily said this was his favorite thing to see in London. He came every month. After the ceremony, Emily walked around the palace. She looked up at the famous balcony. It was empty now, but she knew it had seen many important moments. The balcony was added to the front of the palace in the 1840s at the suggestion of Prince Albert, Queen Victoria's husband. The first time the royal family stood there was in 1851 during a big exhibition. Since then, it had become a place for the king or queen to wave to the people. During big events like royal weddings or the monarch's birthday parade called Trooping the Color, the family appears there. Crowds fill them all and cheer as the royal family waves. Emily pictured Prince William and Kate Middleton on their wedding day in 2011, sharing a kiss on that balcony while thousands below shouted with happiness. It was a moment the whole world watched. She thought about how the balcony connected the royal family to ordinary people. In old times, kings and queens were far away and hard to see. Now they came out and showed themselves. It built trust and made people feel part of something bigger. Emily wrote in her notebook that traditions like this helped a country stay united. Even in tough times, seeing the family together gave hope. She left the palace area and walked to a nearby park called St. James's Park. Ducks swam in the lake, and people sat on benches eating lunch. Emily bought a sandwich from a small shop and sat down to think. The changing of the guard had made her feel the history of London in her bones. It was not dusty or boring. It was alive with music and movement and crowds from all over the world. In the afternoon, she decided to go to Westminster Abbey. She took the underground train called the Tube and got off at Westminster Station. The Abbey stood right there, tall and beautiful with its pointed towers. Emily bought a ticket and went inside. The air felt cool and quiet. The stone floors were worn smooth by hundreds of years of footsteps. She walked slowly, looking at the high ceilings and colorful stained glass windows. Westminster Abbey had been the place for coronations since 1066. That was when William the Conqueror became king after the Battle of Hastings. He was crowned here on Christmas Day. Since then, almost every king and queen had their coronation in this church. Emily stood near the spot where the throne was placed during ceremonies. She imagined the crowns being put on heads, the oil used to anoint the monarch, and the promises made in front of God and the people. The abbey was full of history. There were tombs of famous people like poets, scientists, and kings. Queen Elizabeth I was buried here, and so was Mary, Queen of Scots. Emily read the signs and learned that the last big coronation was for King Charles III in 2023. It was modern in some ways, with cameras and television, but it followed the same old steps. The Archbishop of Canterbury placed the crown, and the people shouted, "God save the King." Outside, bells rang across London. Emily sat in one of the wooden chairs and closed her eyes. She could almost hear the music from past ceremonies. The abbey felt peaceful, like a place where time stood still. A guide nearby told a small group about how the building had survived wars, fires, and even an earthquake long ago. It was a symbol of strength, just like the monarchy itself. As the sun started to lower, Emily left the abbey and walked along the River Thames. The water was calm, and boats passed by. She thought about how these traditions were not just for rich people or tourists. They belonged to everyone. Locals came to see the changing of the guard on their days off. Families brought children to teach them about history. Visitors from other countries, like her, came to learn and feel connected to something bigger than themselves. That evening, Emily went to a small pub near her hotel. She ordered fish and chips and a cup of tea. The pub was warm and noisy with people talking and laughing. She opened her notebook and wrote down everything she had seen that day. Her hand moved fast across the pages. She described the sound of the drums, the shine of the buttons on the guards' coats, the quiet inside the abbey, and the way the balcony looked against the sky. She realized this trip was changing her. Back home, she taught history in a school, but it often felt like just facts in a book. Here, the facts were real. They had color, sound, and feeling. She wanted to take this excitement back and share it with her students. Maybe she could make history come alive for them too. As night came, Emily walked back to her hotel. The streets were lit with lamps and Big Ben chimed in the distance. She felt tired but happy. This was only the first day, but already she knew these royal traditions were worth seeing. They were not old and forgotten. They were living stories that told of loyalty, beauty, and the way people hold on to what matters. She lay in bed thinking about tomorrow. There were more places to visit, more traditions to witness. Kensington Palace, the Tower of London, Windsor Castle. Each one had its own special customs. But today had set the tone. Buckingham Palace and Westminster Abbey had welcomed her to London's royal world. She closed her eyes with a smile. The journey had just begun, and she could not wait for what came next. The next morning started early. Emily woke up with the sound of birds outside her window. She dressed quickly and headed out again. She wanted to see more of the area around Buckingham Palace. She walked back to the mall. In the daylight, it looked even wider. She noticed how clean everything was. People jogged, walked dogs, or just sat on the grass. It felt like a place where the past and present met every day. She stopped at the Victoria Memorial in front of the palace. The statue of Queen Victoria sat high on a stone base, with gold details shining in the sun. Around it were figures representing parts of the empire from long ago. Emily read the words carved there. They spoke of victory, peace, and love. She thought about how the queen had stood on the balcony many times, waving to her people. Her reign was long, and she made the monarchy more visible to ordinary folks. Emily then went to the guards' barracks nearby. She could not go inside, but she watched from the street as soldiers practiced. They marched in perfect lines, their boots shining. It reminded her that these men and women were real soldiers, not just performers. They trained hard and served the country. The ceremony she saw yesterday was part of their duty, a way to show readiness and respect. She spent the morning walking around the royal parks. Green Park was quiet, with flowers blooming. She sat on a bench and watched squirrels run up trees. A man feeding pigeons told her stories about how the parks were once hunting grounds for kings. Now, they were open to everyone. It was a tradition of sharing beauty with the public. Around noon, she returned to Buckingham Palace. A smaller inspection was happening today. It was not the full changing of the guard, but still interesting. A captain checked the soldiers on duty. He walked along the line, looking at each one closely. The guard stood straight, eyes forward. Emily admired their focus. It was a small tradition, but it kept everything in order. She ate lunch in a cafe nearby. She had a jacket potato with cheese and beans. While eating, she looked at her photos from yesterday. The bearskin hats looked even taller in the pictures. She smiled at how the crowd had pushed to get good views. Everyone wanted to be close to the action. In the afternoon, she went back to Westminster Abbey. She wanted to see more details she missed the first time. She walked to the Poets' Corner, where famous writers like Chaucer and Dickens were remembered. Then, she went to the coronation chair. It was old and wooden, with a stone underneath called the Stone of Scone. Kings and queens sat on it during their crowning. The stone had a long history, coming from Scotland long ago. It was a symbol of the union of the kingdoms. A volunteer guide talked to her group about Queen Elizabeth II's coronation in 1953. It was the first one shown on television. Millions watched at home. The queen wore a beautiful dress and carried heavy robes. She promised to serve her people all her life. Emily felt moved by the story. The queen kept that promise for over 70 years. Emily spent a long time in the abbey. She touched the cold stone walls and listened to the quiet. Sometimes a choir practiced, and their voices filled the space like music from heaven. It was a place of prayer, history, and beauty all together. When she left, the sun was setting. The sky turned pink over the River Thames. She walked across Westminster Bridge and looked back at the Abbey and Big Ben. The view was perfect. She took many photos. This city had welcomed her with open arms. Its royal traditions were not hidden away. They were out in the open for anyone to see and feel. That night, Emily wrote more in her notebook. She described the small things, like the way the guard's breath made clouds in the cool air, or how the abbey smelled of old wood and flowers. She wrote about how these experiences made her feel proud of history, even though it was not her own country's. Traditions like these reminded everyone that the past shaped the present. They gave people a sense of belonging. She fell asleep thinking of the days ahead. There were more palaces, more ceremonies, more stories. London was full of them, and she was ready to discover every one. Emily woke up early the next morning. Sunlight came through the thin curtains of her hotel room. She felt excited. Yesterday had been full of new sights and sounds at Buckingham Palace and Westminster Abbey. Today she wanted to see more royal places. She dressed quickly in comfortable clothes and a warm jacket. London mornings could be chilly. She packed her notebook, pen, camera, and a small bottle of water. Then she left the hotel. Her plan was to go to Kensington Palace first. She took the tube train. The ride was short. When she came out of the station, she saw green trees and open space. Kensington Gardens and Hyde Park were right there. The palace stood at the edge of the gardens. It looked smaller than Buckingham Palace, but still grand. Red brick walls and white windows gave it a warm look. Emily walked up the path. Flowers were blooming in the beds. Birds sang in the trees. She bought a ticket and went inside. The rooms were bright and full of light. Many had been home to princesses and princes over the years. The most famous was Princess Diana. She lived here after her marriage to Prince Charles. Emily walked through the rooms where Diana once stayed. There were photos of her smiling with her sons William and Harry. The palace had an exhibition about her life. It showed her dresses, letters, and videos of her work helping people. Emily stood for a long time looking at a simple blue dress Diana wore. It reminded everyone how she brought kindness to the royal family. Outside in the gardens, Emily found the sunken garden. It was quiet and peaceful. Water flowed gently over stones. White flowers grew all around. This garden was made in memory of Princess Diana. It was a place to think and remember. Emily sat on a bench. She watched children play nearby. Families walked hand in hand. A young mother pushed a stroller and smiled at her baby. Emily thought about how royal traditions were not only about big ceremonies. They were also about personal stories and quiet moments. Diana's garden showed that the royal family could touch hearts in simple ways. She walked further into Kensington Gardens. There was a statue of Peter Pan. It stood near the long water lake. Children loved this spot. Emily remembered reading the story as a child. The royal family had connections to many artists and writers. Queen Victoria loved the Peter Pan story. She allowed the statue to be placed here. Emily took photos of the statue with sunlight shining on it. She felt happy. This was a lighter side of royal life. After Kensington, Emily decided to visit the Royal Mews. It was near Buckingham Palace. She walked back through the parks. The air smelled fresh from the grass. When she arrived, she joined a guided tour. The Royal Mews was where the royal carriages and horses were kept. The guide was a friendly woman in a uniform. She explained that these horses and coaches were used for special occasions. Emily saw the famous Gold State coach. It was huge and covered in gold. Carvings of kings and gods decorated every part. The coach had been used for coronations since 1762. It was pulled by 8 horses. The guide said it was very heavy. The ride was slow and bumpy, but it looked magnificent. Emily touched a small model of the coach. She imagined the king or queen sitting inside during a big day. The windows were glass, so people could see them. Crowds would line the streets and wave. She learned that the coach was only used for the most important events like coronations. For weddings or other days, lighter carriages were used. There was also the Diamond Jubilee State coach. It was newer and more comfortable. It had pieces from historic ships and buildings inside. Emily liked how the royals mixed old and new. It showed respect for the past while living in the present. The stables were clean and smelled of hay. Horses stood calmly in their boxes. Some were black, some gray. They were big and strong. The guide said the horses trained every day. They had to be calm in crowds and loud noises. Emily watched a groom brush one horse. The animal looked peaceful. This tradition of caring for royal horses went back hundreds of years. It was part of the household cavalry. The same horses sometimes appeared in parades. Emily spent over an hour in the mews. She wrote notes about the coaches and horses. She thought about how these things were not just decorations. They were tools for ceremony. They helped show the strength and beauty of the monarchy. When she left, she felt she had seen something special. Not many people got to stand so close to these historic items. Next, she walked to Hyde Park. It was close by. The park was large with wide paths and big trees. People rode horses, bicycled, or walked dogs. Emily found a spot near the Serpentine Lake. She sat and ate an apple she had brought. Boats moved slowly on the water. Children fed ducks. She thought about how royal parks were a gift to the people. In old times, kings kept these lands for hunting. Over time, they opened them. Queen Victoria made Hyde Park public. Now everyone could enjoy the green space. In the park, there was a tradition of Speaker's Corner. Emily walked there. People stood on small boxes and talked about anything. Some spoke about politics, others about life. A man was talking about freedom. A woman argued with him in a friendly way. Emily listened for a while. She liked how this place allowed free speech. It was a tradition protected by law. Even the royal family respected it. It showed that Britain valued open talk. As the afternoon went on, Emily headed to the Tower of London. She took the tube again. When she arrived, the White Tower stood tall. The walls were thick stone. Ravens walked on the grass. Legend said if the ravens left, the kingdom would fall. The guards fed them every day to keep them happy. Emily bought a ticket and joined a tour with a yeoman warder. These men were called beefeaters. They wore red and gold Tudor uniforms. The guide was funny and told stories well. He led the group through the grounds. He talked about the Bloody Tower. Princes had been kept there long ago and never seen again. He showed the place where famous people were executed. And Boleyn, wife of Henry VIII, lost her head here. The guide made the dark history interesting without being scary. Emily listened carefully. She learned that the tower was a prison, a palace, and a fortress. Kings lived here in old times. Now, it held the crown jewels. The group went into the jewel house. It was dark inside with bright lights on the treasures. Emily saw the crowns, scepters, and orbs used in coronations. The imperial state crown sparkled with diamonds, rubies, and sapphires. It was heavy. The king or queen wore it after being crowned. The Cullinan diamond was the biggest in the world. Parts of it were in different crowns. Emily stood close to the glass cases. She felt amazed. These jewels were not just pretty. They were symbols of power and history. The guide explained how the jewels were used only for big ceremonies. After, they went back to the tower. The queen or king wore them again at the state opening of Parliament. Emily pictured the scene. The monarch in robes and crown riding in a coach to Parliament. It was a tradition that linked the past to today. Outside again, Emily watched the ravens. One hopped near her feet. She smiled. The tower felt full of stories. Some happy, some sad, but all important. She stayed until late afternoon. The sun made the white tower glow. She took many photos. When she left the tower, she walked along the Thames. The river was busy with boats. Tower Bridge looked beautiful with its towers and blue paint. Emily crossed the bridge. She stopped in the middle and looked back at the tower. It stood strong against the sky. She felt the weight of centuries. So many kings and queens had passed through those gates. That evening, Emily went to a small cafe near the river. She ordered soup and bread. She opened her notebook. She wrote about the sunken garden, the gold state coach, the ravens, and the sparkling crowns. Each thing was different but connected. They all showed how royal traditions lived on. They were not stuck in the past. People still cared for them. Guards trained, horses were brushed, jewels were cleaned. It took work to keep history alive. She thought about her own life. Back home, she sometimes felt history was far away. Here it was close. She could touch it, see it, hear it. These traditions made her want to learn more. They made her want to share what she saw. Maybe her students would feel the same excitement if she told the stories well. Night came. Lights turned on along the river. Emily walked back to her hotel slowly. She passed street musicians playing soft music. She passed couples holding hands. London felt warm and welcoming. She knew tomorrow would bring more adventures. Windsor Castle was next. She had read it was the oldest royal home still used. She could not wait. But tonight she was happy with what she had seen. Kensington Palace showed the human side. The Royal Mews showed the grand side. The Tower showed the strong side. Each place added to her understanding. Royal traditions were like a big family tree. Branches went in many directions, but all came from the same roots. She reached her hotel. She washed her face and changed into pajamas. She lay in bed with her notebook beside her. She read what she wrote. Then she closed her eyes. Dreams of palaces and crowns filled her sleep. The journey was still young, and every day brought new wonder. The following morning was bright. Emily ate breakfast quickly. Toast, jam, and tea. She checked her map. Windsor was outside London. She took a train from Paddington Station. The ride took about 1 hour. She looked out at green fields and small towns. When she arrived in Windsor, she walked up the hill. The castle came into view. It was huge. Towers and walls rose high. Flags flew on top. Emily bought a ticket and went in. The castle felt different from others. It was still the home of the king. When the royal standard flag flew, it meant the monarch was there. Today the flag was up. Emily felt special. She was visiting a working royal home. She toured the state apartments. The rooms were big and beautiful. Paintings covered the walls. Gold decorations shone everywhere. One room was the Waterloo Chamber. It had pictures of leaders who beat Napoleon. Another room had tables set for banquets. Emily imagined kings and queens welcoming guests from other countries. These banquets were a tradition of friendship between nations. She went to St. George's Chapel. It was inside the castle grounds. The chapel was stunning. Tall windows let in colored light. Banners of knights hung from the ceiling. This was where the Order of the Garter was celebrated, the oldest order of chivalry. Knights wore blue robes and walked in processions. Emily stood near the tomb of Queen Elizabeth II. It was simple but moving. Many people left flowers outside. She spent time in the chapel. A small service was happening. Voices sang old hymns. Emily sat quietly. She felt peace. This place had seen coronations, weddings, and funerals. Prince Harry and Meghan were married here. It mixed old customs with new people. After the chapel, Emily walked the castle grounds. She saw the long walk, a long path with trees on both sides. It went far into the distance. Deer sometimes walked there. Today it was quiet. She strolled slowly. She thought about how the castle had been home to kings since William the Conqueror. Over 900 years. That was a long time. She visited the doll house of Queen Mary's. It was tiny but perfect. Every room had small furniture and books. It showed how royals like to collect beautiful things. As the day ended, Emily took the train back to London. She felt tired but full of joy. Windsor had shown her the private side of royal life, the places where the family lived and worked. Back in her hotel, she wrote again. Pages filled with descriptions. She drew small sketches of the castle towers and the banners. She knew this trip was changing her. These traditions were teaching her about loyalty, beauty, and time. They were worth seeing. Everyone should witness them if they could. She looked out her window. City lights twinkled. Tomorrow she would explore more. Maybe Horse Guards or the Thames. There was so much left. And she was ready. Emily opened her eyes to another bright London morning. She stretched and smiled. The first 2 days had been wonderful. Buckingham Palace, Westminster Abbey, Kensington Palace, the Royal Mews, and the Tower of London had filled her mind with pictures and feelings. Today, she wanted to see traditions that showed the military side of the royals. She knew the household cavalry and horse guard parade were important. She dressed in jeans, a sweater, and good walking shoes. She put her notebook and camera in her bag. Then, she left the hotel. She took the tube to Westminster. When she came up from underground, she saw the big building of Horse Guards. It was white with columns and a large arch in the middle. Soldiers on horses stood outside. Their uniforms were blue with gold, and they wore tall silver helmets with long plumes. The horses were black and shiny. Emily walked closer. She could hear the soft sound of horses breathing and the clink of metal bits. At 11 o'clock, the daily ceremony began. Two soldiers on horseback rode out from the arch. They were the sentries. They moved slowly and stopped in their places. Another soldier inspected them. He checked their uniforms, boots, and horses. Everything had to be perfect. Emily watched from a good spot near the railings. The crowd was small, but interested. A father lifted his little boy onto his shoulders so the child could see better. The boy pointed and said, "Look at the big hat." This tradition started long ago in the time of King Charles II. The Horse Guards building was made to protect the king and queen. The cavalry soldiers were chosen for their skill and bravery. Every day, rain or shine, they mounted guard. It was a small but important ritual. It reminded people that the monarchy had protectors who were always ready. After the inspection, the soldiers stayed still. They did not move much. Flies sometimes landed on their faces, but they kept looking straight ahead. Emily admired their control. It took great discipline. She thought about her own life. Sometimes she found it hard to stay focused. These soldiers showed what real discipline looked like. She stayed for a while longer. Then she walked through the arch into the parade ground behind. It was a large open space with gravel. On special days, big events happened here. The Trooping the Color Parade for the King's birthday took place in this spot. Emily had seen pictures of it. Hundreds of soldiers in red coats marched in perfect lines. The king or queen watched from platform. Planes flew overhead in formation. The royal family stood on the Buckingham Palace balcony afterward. It was a day of celebration for the whole country. Today the ground was quiet. Emily imagined the noise and color of the big parade. She wrote in her notebook about how these military traditions brought people together. They showed pride in the armed forces and love for the monarch. Even people who did not care much about royals enjoyed watching the soldiers march. She left Horse Guards and walked to nearby St. James's Park again. She liked the calm water and the birds. She sat on a bench and ate a banana. While she ate, she thought about the next place. She wanted to see Clarence House. It was close. Clarence House was the home of King Charles when he was Prince of Wales. Now it was used for some royal events. She could not go inside, but she could see it from outside. She walked to the front. The house looked elegant with white walls and black railings. Flowers grew in window boxes. A flag flew to show someone royal was there. Emily stood and looked. She knew the late Queen Mother lived here for many years. She loved her garden parties. She invited ordinary people to come for tea and cakes. It was a way to say thank you to those who work hard in the community. Emily thought about garden parties. They happened every summer at Buckingham Palace. Thousands of guests came. They wore nice clothes and hats. The king or queen walked among them and talked. Sometimes the queen gave out prizes or medals. It was a tradition of kindness and connection. Not everyone got invited, but those who did felt honored. She walked on a green park. It was next door. The park was peaceful with tall trees. She found a path and strolled slowly. She saw people reading books or having picnics. A man played a guitar softly. Emily sat under a tree. She opened her notebook and wrote about the day so far. The soldiers on horses, the quiet inspection, the big parade ground. She drew a quick picture of a helmet with its plume. As the afternoon came, she decided to take a boat on the River Thames. She wanted to see royal places from the water. She walked to Westminster Pier. She bought a ticket for a cruise. The boat was red and white. It had an open top deck. She went up and found a seat at the front. The boat started moving. The wind was cool on her face. Big Ben looked huge from the river. The Houses of Parliament shone in the sun. The guide spoke through a speaker. He told stories about each place they passed. They went under Westminster Bridge. Then they saw the London Eye turning slowly. Further along, they passed the Tower of London again. Emily waved at it like an old friend. The guide talked about Hampton Court Palace. It was further up the river. Henry VIII lived there. He had big parties and tennis games. The palace had a maze in the gardens. People still got lost in it today. The boat turned around after a while. On the way back, the guide pointed to places where royal barges used to sail. In old times, the king had a special boat for journeys on the river. It was decorated with gold and flags. Musicians played. Crowds lined the banks to cheer. Now, boats were modern, but the river still carried the memory of those days. Emily enjoyed the boat ride. The water made everything look different. She saw London from a new angle. Bridges, buildings, and trees all looked beautiful. She took many photos. The sun sparkled on the waves. When the boat stopped, she walked to the south bank. There were street performers and food stalls. She bought an ice cream and sat watching people. A group of dancers performed. Tourists clapped. Emily felt part of the city. London was busy but friendly. Later, she went to the National Portrait Gallery. It was free to enter. She wanted to see paintings of kings and queens. The gallery had rooms full of pictures. She started with the Tudor kings. There was Henry VIII, looking strong and serious. Next to him was his daughter Elizabeth I in a big dress covered with jewels. Emily stood close to the paintings. She studied the faces. These people were real once. They laughed, cried, and made big decisions. She moved to later rooms. There were paintings of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. They looked happy together. Then came modern ones. Queen Elizabeth II in her crown. King Charles III in his uniform. Each painting showed how the monarchy changed over time. But the traditions stayed. The crowns, the robes, the serious looks. Emily spent 2 hours there. She wrote notes about the clothes and expressions. She thought about how art kept history alive. People could see the past through these pictures. As evening came, she walked back toward her hotel. She passed Trafalgar Square. Nelson's column stood tall. Lions sat at the base. People sat on the steps eating sandwiches. Emily liked this square. It was lively. Sometimes events happened here. The royal family sometimes came for special days. She stopped at a small shop and bought a postcard. She wrote a quick note to her family back home. She told them about the horses and the paintings. She said London was full of surprises. That night, she ate dinner in a pub. She had shepherd's pie and a glass of water. The pub was warm with wooden tables. People talked and laughed. Emily sat in a corner and opened her notebook. She wrote about the day, the mounted guards, the boat ride, the old paintings. Each thing added to her story. She realized these traditions were like bridges. They connected old times to now. They connected kings to ordinary people. They connected her, a visitor from far away, to a long history. She felt grateful. She finished her meal and walked to the hotel. The streets were lit with soft lights. Cars passed slowly. She heard music from somewhere. London never slept completely. In her room, she looked at her photos on the camera. She smiled at the picture of the soldier on his horse. The plume looked like a feather in the wind. She thought about tomorrow. There were more places. Maybe the British Museum or a royal park further out. She had time. She lay down and closed her eyes. Dreams came of horses marching, boats sailing, and faces from old paintings looking back at her. The royal traditions were growing in her heart. They were interesting and beautiful. She wanted to keep learning. The next day started with rain. Soft drops fell on the window. Emily looked out. Gray clouds covered the sky. But she did not mind. Rain was part of London. She put on her rain jacket and went out. She took the tube to Baker Street. From there, she walked to Regent's Park. It was one of the royal parks. Queen Mary once lived nearby. The park was large with flower beds and a lake. Ducks swam and begged for bread. Emily walked along the paths. Roses were still blooming even in the rain. She saw the open-air theater. In summer, plays happened here. Shakespeare's stories came to life under the sky. She found the boating lake. Small boats were tied up. On sunny days, people rowed them. Today the water was still. Emily sat under a big tree. The rain pattered on the leaves above her. She felt calm. Royal parks were special. They were once private hunting grounds. Kings and queens rode horses and chased deer. Then, they opened the parks to everyone. It was a gift, a tradition of sharing nature. She walked to Queen Mary's Gardens. They were full of beautiful flowers, roses in every color. She read the names on small signs. Some flowers were named after royals. Emily took photos even though the day was gray. The colors stood out against the wet leaves. After the park, she went to a nearby cafe. She had hot chocolate and a muffin. She warmed her hands on the cup. She wrote about the park, how it felt peaceful, how it showed another side of royal life. Not all traditions were about crowns and soldiers. Some were about gardens and quiet walks. In the afternoon, the rain stopped. The sun came out weak, but warm. Emily decided to visit the Guards Museum. It was near Buckingham Palace. She had passed it before, but not gone in. Now she bought a ticket. The museum was small, but full of uniforms and stories. She saw redcoats from different times. Some were old with big buttons. There were bearskin hats and swords. A guide explained how the guard trained. They practiced marching for hours. They learned to stand still for long times. Emily touched a display of medals. Soldiers earned them for bravery. She watched a short film about the guards' life. It showed them waking early, cleaning uniforms, and marching. It was hard work, but they were proud. Emily felt respect for them. These men and women kept the traditions going every day. She left the museum feeling thoughtful. She walked back to the mall. The sun made the trees look golden. She sat on the grass and watched people. A jogger ran by. A family took pictures. Life went on around the palace. As the day ended, Emily went to a bookstore. She bought a small book about royal ceremonies. She wanted to read more. She sat in the store cafe with a cup of tea. She looked through the pages. Pictures of processions, weddings, and funerals. Each one had meaning. She walked home slowly. The evening air was cool. She passed lights and shops. She thought about her trip. Halfway through now. So much seen. So much more to see. In her hotel, she added to her notes. She wrote about the rain in the park, the museum uniforms, the golden light on the mall. She drew a small sketch of a rose. She knew these days were building something inside her. A love for history. A wish to tell others about it. Royal traditions were not far away or boring. They were alive. They mattered. She turned off the light. Tomorrow would bring new things. She was ready.